to come at you with another free training. It's our strategy success sessions. That's what we're calling them. And I am excited because something has been on my heart. And I'm just checking a few things as I'm going live here, making sure that everybody can hear me. I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm busier now. I'm sure this is you, even though I'm wearing like sweatpants every day, life is just busier now. And it's like when you're on a computer, it's almost like time can fly compared to when you're out and about and kind of like being around people, right? Anyway, today's strategy success session is really going to be about a concept that I feel like all of you know about, but I don't know that we execute it as effectively as we should. And I truly believe this is the foundation of getting true engagement in our classroom. So let me back up a second. I am very much a believer. If you went to any of my Zoom webinars, you know that the webinar wasn't just about learning Zoom. It was, but I flew in there some of my kind of mindset, strategy, philosophies, I guess. And one of them is around the idea that our goal as teachers should be to be getting 100% of our students learning 100% of the time. And I get that teachers will push back to me and say, Carrie, that is not possible. How are you doing that? And I think our work is just as important as a doctor's. And although, right now, given our situation, they are our frontline soldiers, nurses and doctors. But I do think what we do on a regular basis is just as important. And I very much believe that the adults that are influencing children on a regular basis have a very heavy responsibility to remember just how influential they can be and how impactful they can be. And so because I feel like our job is so important, and I believe that it parallels the importance of a doctor, I also believe that as a doctor, if I'm looking for a doctor, there is no way I want a doctor saying to me that he has a goal anything less than 100% of his clients being healed, right? So if I have a disease or, God forbid, the virus or cancer or anything, I want to go to a doctor who says, I don't stop until you are healed, right? And I believe that we need to have that same philosophy. What parent are you going to say, yeah, but not your kid? Because I'm really looking for 80%. I get it. Then we see 80% on standardized test scores. Like, we're like, woo, but that's not really the goal, right? The goal is 100% our kids are learning 100% of the time. So now I get it. We're not going to every single student individually all the time, and we don't have to. And I don't think that we're necessarily going to get to 100% of students learning 100% of the time, but I don't think we should ever stop trying for that. I believe that we will be doing that until the day we retire, at least striving for it. So just like a doctor should be, right? So one of the ways that we get towards 100% learning is that kids have to be in it. They have to want to learn it. They have to see the purpose behind it. And so I was getting dressed the other day and there was all this stuff on the news, and I thought, yes, this is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about purpose. So as teachers, we need to be establishing purpose for our students in a way that is relevant to their lives, that they will understand, so that they want to learn what we're about to teach them. Not because we're telling them this is on the agenda today, not because we're telling them this is the I can statement, but because they see the reason why it impacts and is important to them. So let me take you back what I was just talking about what happened during this whole virus thing last week that really got me to be just a reminder of how important this is. Okay. So if you can remember, and it's still going on, right? But the situation that I'm going to just talk about right now is in Michigan. So the governor of Michigan has put forward a variety of boundaries and barriers and rules, I will say, around what people can and can't do in terms of shelter at home. And there are people that are very, very angry and they're protesting it, right? And they're just saying, I'm not doing that. And I just find human behavior to be very interesting, and it's actually pretty predictable. I'm also looking at the way Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, they speak to people, and they're really truly like bipartisan. You can watch any of the news shows and they're all kind of in favor of what Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci are saying. And I find it interesting to see how bipartisan they truly are. And so then I'm in Connecticut, so I'm looking a lot at Governor Cuomo and what he's saying. And it's across the board, whether you're Democrat or Republican or neither, he seems to be pretty accepted on both sides of the party. And so when you look at the fights that are going on in Michigan, and then the other people in this whole thing that are kind of getting on both sides of the aisle, you got to think about why. And it has to do with purpose. So I've had lots of conversations with my husband about this, and I think it tags very closely to what we need to understand as educators in teaching our students. The Michigan governor came down and kind of let through all of these rules and just said, basically, you're going to do these things. Now, I heard her speak on a news show, I don't remember which one it was, about why she was putting those in place. Now, somebody that was a protester was on the news episode at the same time she was. And that protester said, you've never said all those things to us before. You never told us all of those whys. It was just came top down, and they assumed her intent was malicious. They assumed that she was trying to get to the top of a political ladder. I'm not saying she is or isn't. I really have no opinion about that. But it was so funny because I listened to the protester say, that was the first time you sounded reasonable about it. They're still protesting, don't get me wrong. But that connection was interesting to me, because when that Michigan governor explained why she put some of those rules in place, that protester started to see it a little bit differently. Now, the protesters, the people that are against the protesters, that are frustrated with the protesters, a lot of them, if you're yelling really loud and just fighting, when you really get to those interviews as to what they're fighting about and you hear their why, it's not completely unreasonable, right? Like that, they're making points that are valid. And so what's so interesting is that the fight has more to do with people not understanding each other's why and assuming malintent. I see this in the classroom with classroom management, and I see this with instruction. So with classroom management, I'll see teachers put in rules, and they'll often be what we call a controller, and they don't tell kids why. So they're saying silence in the classroom. And I actually believe that there's many times that there should be silence in the classroom during transitions or a variety of things. But when you don't tell kids why, they're more apt to have their backups and almost want to push the limit because they don't see what's in it for them. When I hear Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci and even Governor Cuomo speaking, they talk a lot about why. They are dripping in purpose. Cuomo, I mean, I watch his news conferences every day because it directly affects me, because I literally live right by New York City. And the things that he's talking about make sense when he explains his rationale behind them. And so he's getting much less fight and pushback from people on the other side of the aisle because he's dripping in why. And so when I coach teachers, it is constant. So if we're learning something, I will always see the I can statement. And teachers will say, well, we talk about the I can statement. And I will hear kindergartners, first graders, second graders, even eighth grade, ninth graders say the I can statements. And yet they don't mean anything to them. They have no idea why they're doing it and why it's important for them. Now, I get it. Sometimes algebra can be hard to come up with purpose. But if you can't tell your students in the city that they live in the life that they have, why learning that topic is important to them, then they're never going to be fully engaged. You might have some of those kids that are intrinsically motivated or pleasers, but they're not really going to learn. because they're not motivated to. Now, I know you guys, and I know you have rationales as to why kids need to learn them. And the I can statement is a good start, but it doesn't explain it in the language that they need it. And just like these fights that we're seeing across the country around these protests, if people could be more ingrained in explaining versus telling, we'd have a very, very different response. Now, there's a whole other layer of bipartisanship that, like, in some ways, no matter what one person says, the other one's going to fight it. But we're not talking about that in schools. When we are dripping in purpose, kids will respond and they will be more intrinsically motivated. So here is a question that I ask kids whenever they are in the classroom. Okay. I walk into a classroom as a coach. Now, remember, I'm not an evaluator. I used to be, and I love that I'm not now, but I do coach principals to ask these questions too. Again, because I want them to be your instructional mentor, instructional leader, not just walking in and checking to see that you did these things on your evaluation. That doesn't help anybody. That's a summative assessment. That's not coaching. Coaching gets you better, and we all need coaches. If LeBron James needs a coach, we do too. I have my own coach. My own coach will watch back this video and then give me feedback, in fact. So we all need coaches. So you as a principal are an instructional leader. That means you are a coach. When I walk in as a coach, I look for 3 things in a classroom, okay? I will go in and ask a student, not what are you doing? Because anybody can tell me what they're doing. That's because they maybe have been told what to do. It is, what are you learning? That is my question. What are you learning? Okay. And I love telling teachers this because I'm like giving you the questions I'm going to ask. This is not a gotcha. This is so that you can really be thinking about purpose. So what are you learning? And then I say, why are you learning it? And then I say, how will you know that you've learned it? Good, right? Right? I got that from Doug Fisher. If you've ever heard of Fisher and Fry, they wrote the book Better Learning Through Structured Teaching. It's like one of my favorite books. I've probably read it 20 times. And I got to work with Doug Fisher. And those 3 questions, when he talked to me about those, were like life changing for me. It changed everything that I ask students when I go into a classroom. What are you learning? Why are you learning it? And how will you know that you've learned it? Now, you as a teacher can be making sure that those kids can answer that question before they go off into a unit or an activity. You as a principal or as a school leader can be asking kids that question. And then if they can't answer it, it's not a gotcha to the teacher. It's a, hey, these kids had a hard time answering this question. How can we make sure that they can? And it should be a coaching opportunity. Okay. It's the same thing with classroom management. So if kids don't understand why they need to be silent during an activity or why they need to walk and not run, then they're not intrinsically going to do it. They'll do it because you told them to, maybe, or those that are less compliant, that challenge you more, they just might not do it. They might protest because they don't understand your why. So your strategy needs to be dripping in purpose. And I love saying this. Like when I was coaching in Cleveland, I remember we were talking about a science concept. And my question is always to teachers, why should your kids living in Cleveland, Ohio, care about learning this? So that's what you're going to ask. Why would my 3rd graders living in, Houston, Texas, care about learning this? And if you can't answer why they should learn it, then you will find it hard to get them to truly learn it too. Now, when you're doing like higher level stuff that's harder to kind of figure out purpose, especially around math, I always love to talk about the reason why solving problems in life requires a skill set of managing through the steps, managing through the problem, understanding what it is and figuring out ways to solve it. That is what math is all day long. So there's lots of real world attachments that you can do to that. You need to drip it in purpose. And how do you know that you established purpose well? If your kids can answer, why am I learning? What am I learning? Why am I learning it? And how will I know that I learned it? Oh, I hope that's helpful to you. Please put comments in, ask any questions. I'm not able to respond while I'm doing this because I have all my notes and I want to be thinking, but if you have comments, I will respond to them. And I hope you found this helpful. Okay, bye.